Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be going over the most played trainers in the Pokemon TCG. And this is based off of play rate, so then percentages as well. So Boss's Orders here is the most played card in the game, or at least most played trainer at between 90 and 100%. It's played in almost every deck in the game. There are certain decks that don't play it, but generally most do, and it's really good. And I also talked about these cards in another video, so I'm not going to be talking about what they do too much, but I imagine many of you are familiar with what they do. If you're not, go check out, well, the website play.limitless, or sorry, just limitless.tcg. Play.limitless.tcg also has these cards. The two websites are linked, but this is from play.limitless, and the cards are from limitless.tcg. So you could do that and look at that while you're watching this video. But then Nest Ball is played at 80 to 90%. So, Gusting, really important in every deck, and Boss's Orders is really the main card to do that. But Nest Ball, the main Pokemon search card in the game, it's played in many decks. There are certainly some that don't, but most decks certainly are playing it. And then also this is from left to right. So left is most played within the same tier. Super Rod, the classic recovery card, really good. Recovers your Pokemon and Energy. Every deck plays Pokemon and Energy. I think I can't think of a deck that doesn't play energies. Maybe some Snorlax builds, but yeah, Super Rod is really really good and the best card to do that. Iono also in this tier, the best regular draw supporter and also disruptive supporter. It's generally good at pretty much every point in the whole game. There are times when it's not as good of a draw supporter for you or not very good at disrupting your opponent, but it's generally good at one or both of those throughout the entire game. Ultra Ball is the other Pokemon search card that is just so good, and it gets any Pokemon. It can also discard cards and is arguably the best way to do that. Moving into 50 through 60% played, and this gets a bit more interesting. Also, nothing from 60 to 70% played is pretty interesting. Pretty big gap between the top 5 cards and the cards below it. And as you see, as we move down this list here, there are more cards just near the bottom, and this is only cards played more than 20% of the decks. So any cards played below that, there's a lot of other cards in the game that see a lot less play and are just not as common. But Buddy Buddy Poffin, the other Pokemon search card that's really good, allowing you to search for basic Pokemon of lower HP. Not every deck is playing those, but the decks are playing it. I really love Buddy Buddy Poffin. It's a card I've talked about a bunch, and it's a really powerful card. Counter Catcher is another gusting card and is really solid. It's not Boss's Orders, but it's still really good, and many decks can use it, but not all decks choose to, although over half the decks. And Earthen Vessel is the last card that over half the decks choose to play. It is arguably the best way to discard cards is between Ultra Ball and Earthen Vessel. Ultra Ball is just better generally, but it does discard 2, which you don't always want. Earthen Vessel is an easy way to discard 1 card. Also gets your energy out of the deck. It's really good in certain decks, specifically certain highly played decks, notably Gardevoir and Raging Bolt. Those are super highly played decks and super good decks, and Earthen Vessel, really good in those. The next supporter we see on the list, moving to the 40 through 50% range, is Arven. Arven is a really solid supporter and definitely the third supporter in terms of play rate in the game, although it is not necessarily the third best. It depends on the deck, and this is where we get into the difference between fast and slow decks. These top 5 cards are played in, most decks. Buddy Buddy Poffin, Counter Catcher are generally played in slower decks, and Earthen Vessel is generally played in faster decks, but they could be put in really any deck. However, Arven's generally played in slower decks because it allows you to search for specific cards, but it doesn't give you a large quantity of card draw. It just gets you those 2 cards you search for, an item and a tool card, and so there are some items. Obviously, on this list, there are a good chunk. I think most of the cards are items. A lot are. And then there are some tools. The tools are often included just for value with Arven. Forest Seal Stone is the second tool on this list, but it is, really good with Arven. Then Lost Vacuum here is a solid tech option. It's a counter card, but it's really good. Not too much to say about it. Then we also have Hisuian Heavy Ball, another tech option style card to get cards out of your prizes, kind of, Pokemon search like Nest Ball, but it's not the same. And then we also have Palpad, the other recovery card, recovers supporters. Every deck's playing supporters. Realistically, Boss's Orders in almost every deck. Iono in really a lot of decks. Arven in a lot of decks, and a few other supporters in a good chunk of decks. But every deck plays a number of supporters, so Palpad always really good there, though not in every list. Moving on to the 30 through 40% range, these cards are still played in a lot of decks and maybe viewed as staples, but they're certainly noticeably less than half the decks. Prime Catcher is the main ace spec in the game. It is the other gusting card, and again, arguably the best gusting card, but it is an ace spec, so keep that in mind. You can only play one ace spec, but Boss's Orders, the clear best gusting card, but it is, you can't always play it, and so because it's a supporter, you can't Boss's Orders and some other supporter like Iono, but you could Prime Catcher and Iono or Counter Catcher and Iono. And also it is a switch. Speaking of switch, we have switch card and regular switch. Switch card is just better than switch if you're only playing basic Pokemon. So if you're looking at faster decks, then you may be looking at Prime Catcher as an example of a faster switch, and also basic Pokemon are generally faster decks, so Switch card is going to be really good in those decks. Pokegear is a really interesting card as well. It's a card that I don't really like, but it is a consistency boost getting supporters from the deck, so, kind of cool. Not my favorite, but I know there are a lot of people who really love this card, and it's played in low quantities in a number of different decks, and higher quantities in some as well. And you're generally looking at decks like Raging Bull Ogerpon, which need a specific supporter, but also decks like Lost Zone. Lost Zone, you need Colas Experiment in the early game, but you can get away with missing a specific supporter at certain points. And so decks that play like Pokestop may be looking for another out to a supporter through an item, which this does, Pokegear does. And then Switch, I said, is, Switch, right? Switch is your Pokemon. Professor Toad's Scenario is actually the fourth most played supporter in the game, which is pretty crazy. It's this way because if you look at Gardevoir, that's, a good deck, and it's the best deck, and it plays Professor Toad's Scenario. And then, Snorlax, really good. It's arguably the best deck in the game as well. They're so different. You can really make an argument either way. Snorlax is like so good for grinding ladder. It's just absurd. The Gardevoir is just really good in general. And the Raging Bull Ogerpon is also very good. And there are other decks that are really good. Pidgeot Control, really good. But Professor Terra's Scenario is a counter to those control decks and is super good in Gardevoir. And it does have other use cases as well. Bravery Charm is a really good tool increasing basic HP, kind of like the opposite of Professor Terra's Scenario. Professor Terra's Scenario generally going in slower decks. Bravery Charm generally going in faster, big basic focused decks, although it is in Gardevoir, right? You want to get a bigger whatever, like Drifloon, Drifloon or Screamtail, although it can go in other Pokemon as well. And then Force Seal Stone is the other fast card in the game. It's a tool card that lets you search for any card. It's good. You can only use it once per game, but it's really good. Rare Candy is a slower card, right? Rare Candy played in Stage 2 decks, and Stage 2 decks are, slower than basic decks. You're attacking turn 2 or turn 3 or whatever, depending on the attack. And Rare Candy is a really good card and, required in... I was going to say it's required in every Stage 2 deck. Gardevoir doesn't always play it. Lugia Archeops never plays it, but generally, required for Charizard, Dragapult, Baxcalibur, and whatever other Stage 2 you want to play, assuming it's a normal Stage 2. And Professor's Research, a very fast card. Discard your hand, draw 7 cards. Discards everything, which you might not want, but it does that, and then draws just so many cards. It's really good. Artizone is a stadium that lets you search your deck for a basic Pokemon, put it on there, assuming it doesn't have a rule box. It's kind of like Nest Ball or Buddy Buddy Poffin or Ultra Ball, but it's a stadium. That means you can use it over and over, but so can your opponent. So that's a pretty big issue. Really amazing card, but it is double-sided. And Pokestop is another stadium card that is double-sided, but it is a turbo card. Artizone generally going in slower decks like Charizard and Dragapult, but Pokestop is a fast card, a very, very fast card, being played in Raging Bull Ogerpon, Gym Power Excalibur, Lost Zone, but faster builds a Lost Zone. So it's a good card, but very fast, discarding random cards from the top of your deck. And then we have Unfair Stamp. Unfair Stamp is the, slower ace spec compared to Prime Catcher being the faster ace spec. Unfair Stamp is a card that, it's a disruptive item ace spec. It's kind of like Iono. It's better than Iono, and it's an item, but it's it's an ace spec, right? Ace specs are sometimes an issue. You can't play both Prime Catcher and Unfair Stamp, but I'm surprised that they're both played so much. Specifically Unfair Stamp. I knew it was played a lot, but it's played even more than I thought. And then Technical Machine Evolution is the last card on this list. It's certainly a slower card that evolves, but using your attack, it's a pretty good card though. But anyway, these are the most played cards in the game. I figured this is a useful list to have. I made a video where I kind of talked about the cards that you need, but these are actually the cards you need. These are not my opinions. These are this is just what people play. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with all the cards in this list, but these are the cards that people play. And so if you're wondering, what do I need now to play? These are the cards. But anyway, that's all for today's video. Consider liking and subscribing, hitting the bell, and of course, comment down below your thoughts. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.